All right, guys, so quick thing. We're first going to start off with some LEQ stuff. Woo! Okay. Just remember, we talked about Monday understanding what types of prompts. Remember causation, comparison, continuity change over time. Okay. And then yesterday, we focused on thesis writing. Okay. And I did, if you turned it in, I did provide feedback. And the two things I've noticed is, keep it simple. Okay. Don't give me all these details. Okay. Keep it simple. The second thing is some people missed it where it was like, I need a point blank, explicit thesis sentence, either at the beginning or the end. For example, a lot of people chose the whole like social effects of social media on social lives of teenagers. And you hinted there were some positives and there's some negatives, but like go out and say it, saying overall, there are significantly more negative effects, or overall there are significantly more positive effects. Like have one more sentence and that will help you. Okay. All right. And then what we're doing now is context. Okay. This is where it might be it's the same idea as if you took AP Euro, but I'm just a little more like explicit in what I want. So when we talk about when we talk about context, I really think you should embrace pre-context, which is basically it goes the very first thing in an LEQ, okay? And you're basically setting the stage for what the prompt is. So let's just pretend the prompt is like evaluate the reasons that the Union won the American Civil War. So it's causation. We know it's about basically tell me why the Union, or how and why the Union won the American Civil War. So what would my pre-context be? It'd be about 4 sentences of like what led to the Civil War. Okay, so I would talk about maybe the Compromise 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, maybe even probably the last thing I would do is the election of 1860, which is the election of Lincoln, and South Carolina will secede because Lincoln's elected. Okay, the next thing I do is insert my thesis. Maybe like, there were many reasons why the Union won. One would be pertains to foreign policy, such as preventing the Confederacy from getting an alliance. Another would be economic reasons, such as having 90% more industry than, or 90 times more industry than the South. And then like in the end, overall, the economic reasons were the reason why the Union won the Civil War. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, I made a video last year during the early pandemic part, and it is basically focusing on context, okay? And it's 8 minutes, and it ends abruptly because like it cut off because the internet stopped. But just note, we're just watching that first part, and it keeps on talking about a DBQ. We don't talk about DBQs until January, but it's the same it's the same thing you do with a DBQ and LEQ. So context, same thing, okay? You're gonna watch it, and then in a couple of minutes, I will post a practice context. All you're doing is context. You don't have to worry about the thesis, just the pre-context, okay? What I would suggest, because you can collaborate with people, okay? What I would suggest is that, get one of the documents, share it with everyone in your group, and then y'all alternate typing a sentence. Like the game where it's like you say a word and then like someone else says the next word and you make a sentence. Think it like that, where it's like, one person types the first sentence, and then on the same document, another person types the second thing, and y'all can like collaborate. And before you move on to the next sentence, make sure whatever you have is good. Got it? Okay. So I'm going to post that. Right now, let's see. Contextualization video I am posting right now. I will tell you when we are, filling in blanks. Okay. So remember, Washington decided not to serve a third term or even run for a third term. Okay. And this will lead to the election of 1796. If you notice here, we actually have political parties running. The first presidential election with political parties will be the election of 1796. Okay. And what's going to happen is that the Federalists are going to run John Adams. Okay. The Democratic Republicans are going to convince Thomas Jefferson to come out of retirement, political retirement, to run for the Democratic Republicans. You see that plan is working that Jefferson wanted. He's very ambitious, but you have to be secretive about that. Adams gets first place in the Electoral College. Jefferson gets second place. Okay, remember how it works back then is first place is president, second place is VP. Okay, so this is a recipe for disaster. You have a Federalist president and a Democratic Republican vice president. Let's see. Okay, so remember we talked about how France is mad at us because we will declare neutrality. They feel like we, oh, thank you. France feels betrayed by us. And so what they're going to do, it's very similar to impressment, but we don't call it impressment. Impressment is where the British hijack American merchant ships and force you into the British Navy. What the French are doing is they're going to capture U.S. merchant ships. Are they going to force you into the Navy? No. This is a French thing. And again, they're basically mad at us for declaring neutrality. John Adams will follow Washington's precedent by not wanting to go to war. Okay, he's not a war hawk. I mean, he's not trigger happy. He wants to negotiate and prevent and promote peace. Okay, so what he does is he will send some U.S. diplomats to France, okay, to negotiate some type of like settlement to stop this ransacking of ships. Okay, well, when these, and this is this blank, okay. This blank is the Xyz Affair in your notes. Do you need your notes? Okay. Okay. The Xyz Affair. I'll give it to you in a little bit. Okay. It's all good. That is the blank. Okay, so again, we talked about the pre-context. The French are mad about neutrality, so they start ransacking and capturing our ships. We send diplomats. Okay, when these American diplomats arrive in Paris to meet with the foreign minister of France, Charles Talleyrand, there are 3 secret French agents. They approach the 3 American diplomats, and they say, "We know you have a meeting with Charles Talleyrand. Well, we are delivering a message from him. And we're not going to tell you our names. We're Secret Agent X, Secret Agent Y, and Secret Agent Z." Okay? And what he is, what they say is, we know you have a meeting, and if you want to actually be able to attend that meeting, you're going to have to pay a bribe. Okay? How much was that bribe? $250,000 just to Mr. Talleyrand. They also said they wanted $10 million in a loan, meaning like they'd get the money back to the French government. Okay, think about it. We send diplomats to France to talk so we can avoid a war. Like, you should be welcoming that, right? Instead, like, they're telling us we have to pay a chunk of money just to meet with the French government so we can talk about avoiding war? No, who do the French think they are? And so we refuse, okay? And we just, it's going to be awkward, okay? And so there's this famous quote. You see it right here. Where is it? Number 4, millions for defense, but not one penny for tribute. Tribute is a bribe, so we do not pay it. And again, this does not solve the problem with the French hurting our ships, basically. So there's something called a quasi-war. It reminds me of like the phony war near the beginning of World War II. Basically, it's like we might go to war with France. We're going to try not to, but we need to be careful and be ready just in case. So what does John Adams convince Congress to do? Establish the American Navy. He is the father of the Navy, all because of the Xyz Affair. Okay, now what's going to happen too, though, is that this will really lead to a lot of anti-French feelings in America. And remember, which political party, y'all tell me, which political party likes France, is like Team France, not Team England? Which one is Team France? I'm looking at the chat. Who's Team France? Yep, Democratic Republicans. Good. And so what's going to happen is when it's a midterm election in 1798, do you think a lot of Democratic Republicans are going to win their seats back? No, because it's the whole XYZ affair. Okay. All right. And here is it's called the Paris Monster, and it's depicting the XYZ affair, if you see that cartoon ever. Okay. All right, so remember, I just gave you some pre-context for the Alien and Sedition Acts, okay? 1798-ish midterm elections, Democratic Republicans, a lot of them lose their seats. That means the Federalists win, okay? Not only that, they win more seats, the Federalists will control both majorities in the House of Representatives and the Senate, okay? So it's go time for them, right? They basically control the legislative branch. It's going to be go time, okay? So they are going to create a series of laws that are designed to hurt their rivals, the Democratic Republicans. Shouldn't Congress create laws to benefit the majority of Americans? That is why they should create laws and stuff. That's what they should do. But the Federalists who controlled Congress in 1798 created laws simply to hurt their rivals, okay? And it's called collectively the Alien and Sedition Acts, okay? Acts, okay? The first part, and let me just talk about this. It's going to hurt immigrants, okay? The Democratic Republicans want to help the common man out. They're against the elite, right? That's Federalists who want the elite to rule. So what happens is a lot of immigrants, you have to live in America for at least 5 years to apply to be a citizen, okay? The Democratic Republicans want to help immigrants. They pass legislation to help immigrants, okay? So if you're an immigrant and you actually become an American citizen, wouldn't it make sense for you to join the Democratic Republican Party, okay? So a couple of these laws are actually going to be designed to hurt immigrants, which would definitely hurt Democratic Republicans, okay? So first one is called the Naturalization Act. This basically said instead of 5 years of living in America to apply to be a citizen, they're almost going to triple that to 14 years. So think about it. You are delaying the amount of time, like you're delaying immigrants becoming citizens longer now. So you're also delaying new members of the Democratic Republican Party. Next, you have the Alien Act, and y'all know alien means foreigner, okay? This said the president could deport any dangerous alien, okay? And that was it. It said dangerous alien. Think about it. Dangerous could mean lots of things. And if the Federalists are looking to prevent immigrants from becoming citizens, they're going to be really watching those immigrants. And if they do anything that could be questionable, even if it's just a little dangerous, deport them. And then you're hurting the Democratic Republicans. But What I'm about to talk about next is the sketchiest one because it's unconstitutional. Okay, it's called the Sedition Act. And what I want you to do in your notes is circle where it says publish, because a lot of people get this wrong. Okay, it's not about you can't say what you want. It's about publishing. So think newspaper editors. You can't publish things. Okay, now listen closely. Okay, and it's aimed at the press, clearly, like the newspapers. Okay, but it says you could not publish any criticism against the following things or people: President, Cabinet, Supreme Court, Congress, the flag. Who or what did I leave off that is not protected from the Aliens or the Sedition Act? Again, yeah, okay. Vice President. Remember, they're not part. So think about it. Basically, hands off to everyone who's like all the Federalist parts of the government. The Vice President was not protected. And so those newspaper editors and stuff, they need to make money and they need to, like, write stuff. And people want to hear the negative, So basically, it's free reign for to attack Jefferson. Okay, someone actually said that someone should shoot a cannonball up John Adams' butt. We'll say that word, and that person will have to serve 6 months in prison for violating the Sedition Act. Okay, but hey, if you said that about Thomas Jefferson, fair game. Okay, so here's the question: is this law constitutional? Yeah, it goes against your First Amendment, which has lots of different things, and it's that freedom of the press. Okay, so this is a time where, like, some states are going to say, oh, we're going to ignore this law. So turn to the back side, okay? The blank here is response. Press, Debbie, press. Okay, on the back side, it's past and a response. And let me tell you this right now. You cannot tell me the complete story of the Alien Sedition Acts if you leave out Virginia, Kentucky resolutions, and vice versa. You cannot tell me the complete story about the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions if you don't tell me about the Alien Sedition Acts. It's definitely a cause and effect. Just like Boston Tea Party led to intolerable acts, Alien Sedition Acts led to the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. Okay, so what's going to happen is Thomas Jefferson anonymously, okay, and his buddy, James Madison. James Madison's a Democratic Republican at this time, okay, and they will draft an anonymous resolution to the Virginia state legislature saying that these Alien and Sedition Acts are unconstitutional and we should ignore that law, okay. Virginia's legislature adopts that resolution. Then Kentucky's legislature adopts a very similar resolution, okay? This is the time where there is a law that states feel that it's unconstitutional. They're choosing to vote to ignore it, okay? Now let's go into some philosophy. There's something called the state compact theory, okay? Remember how the Articles of Confederation was our first document, and it gave basically the power to the states, okay? The only way to allow the Constitution to be ratified is that those states had to vote for it, okay? So in the minds of, like, your Virginians and Kentuckians, I guess you could say, they're thinking, we gave the Constitution and the national government its power. If we feel like there is something that violates the Constitution, just like how we gave them its power, we can also choose to ignore the power and take it away. That's called the state compact theory. And instead of saying we're going to ignore the law, we have to do like a special legal term. Make sure you know this. Nullification. Okay? And okay, see where it says nullification right here? Like, you have to know that. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts, okay? And y'all know when something is null, that means it's void. So Virginia and Kentucky will vote to nullify the Alien and Sedition Acts, because they believe they're unconstitutional. Okay, any questions there? All right, so just pointing out, people in America realized that the Federalists were passing laws to hurt a political party, not to protect the American goodwill, And so do you think they're going to do really well in the election of 1800? Heck no. Okay. So, yes, Izana, the state compact theory is basically the idea that the states gave the Constitution and the national government its power, and that also means that they can take it away. Okay. And nullification is a prime example of that. Like, we choose to vote to nullify and ignore this law. Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about the election of 1800. Okay, what's going to happen? Okay, remember I just told you the Federalists, they will kind of be unpopular in some areas because the Alien and Sedition Acts. Okay, the Alien and Sedition Acts hurt the Federalists in the election of 1800. And just remember, 2020, we're going to have a presidential election this year, but there also are some Senate elections and some House of Representative elections as well. Okay, it's never just a presidential election. Okay, and so what's going to happen is, because the Federalists are very unpopular from this Alien and Sedition Act and the backlash with it in Congress, for instance. Okay, the Federalists lose the majority of the houses in Congress. So that means now who's going to control the majority? Democratic Republicans. Okay. Also, remember, you don't run as a team yet as president. It's first place gets it, second place VP. Okay. You have four main front runners. You have Thomas Jefferson running for the Democratic Republicans. You have Aaron Burr, who used to be a Federalist and just switched to become a Democratic Republican. You have John Adams, Federalist, and you also have a Charles Pinckney. Okay, and long story short, it's kind of understood, Thomas Jefferson's the top dog for the Democratic Republican Party. It's assumed that he would get more votes than Aaron Burr, and Aaron Burr would hopefully become the VP. Okay, what's going to happen? The Electoral College will vote. John Adams gets third place. So does he get anything? No, he's out. He's called a lame duck is what we call it today. He's old news. Okay. But what's sketchy, it's a tie. And I think that blank right there is 73. Thomas Jefferson and Burr tie. And Thomas Jefferson's like, oh, this is great. I'm number one, you're number two. And Burr's like, says who? Like, he didn't realize he would tie for, president. So he doesn't give in. He says, no, if I have a chance to be president, I'm going to go for the gold kind of thing. And so also I want to point out there is a tie. So if there's a tie, that means there's no majority. Okay. So people look at the Constitution. It's like the rule book. What do you do? And in the Constitution, it says if there's no majority, it goes to the House of Representatives to decide the presidency. Okay. So they vote multiple times. We're talking more than 30 times. And it's a standstill, like a stalemate, like deadlock, tie every time. Okay. The Federalists, even though the Democratic Republicans take the majority of seats in Congress, there still are some Federalists in Congress. Okay. And they don't know what to do. So they go and talk to Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton, at this time, he is out of politics. His son will die in a duel, and so he really almost like becomes reclusive, okay? And people go and ask him, as the founder of the Federalist, Burr or Jefferson, okay? Hamilton weighs his, which one, and he tells those Federalists in Congress, if you have to choose one, I would vote for Jefferson. Which to me is like plot twist, right? Like, political parties created because Hamilton and Jefferson could not stand each other. Okay, here's Hamilton's argument. He said this, or his mindset. Jefferson has always been steadfast in his beliefs. Pro-France, Democratic Republican, strict interpretation. He knows what he's about and he's not going to waver. Okay? Aaron Burr, on the other hand, he just wants to, you know how there's some people who will flip-flop their beliefs just to get elected? Okay? That's Aaron Burr. Okay? Aaron Burr was a Federalist, kept on running in different elections like mayor, governor, senator, all that kind of stuff. Okay? Never really won. And then there was a spot that came available in New York that was mainly Democratic Republican. Well, guess what he did conveniently? He changed to the Democratic Republican Party so he could get elected. Okay? So it's the idea of Jefferson has these beliefs. Burr doesn't really have beliefs. He flip-flops depending on who's his audience. So the reason Jefferson wins in 1800 is because of Hamilton, which I think is just a really big plot twist. Okay, so want to point out here, okay, we know that, remember, the election occurs in an even year, but the inauguration always occurs the next year, right? And in this case, it's going to be March of 1801. Today, now there's an amendment, 20th Amendment, I believe, that says January, but it's March up in this time until like the 1940s, okay? So March of 1801, people are freaking out. This is the first time the executive branch, a political party in power, the executive branch, has to lose power and give it up to a new political party in charge of the executive branch. Okay. Also, doesn't help that Congress is doing the same thing. And there are people in some states collecting guns just in case the Federalists they're like protest and don't give up their power. Okay. A lot of historians believe we would have had a civil war if people hadn't followed the rules. Okay. In 1801. Luckily, John Adams read the Constitution. He knows how things work. And it says the Constitution, it says the House decides, the House decided, all that kind of stuff. And the Federalists did lose the power. And so this is the first time you have that transition of one outgoing political party and an ingoing political party, that peaceful transfer of power. It's referred to as the Revolution of 1800 because, again, the Democratic Republicans, they're going into the executive branch, and the Federalists had to go out, give it up. And this just shows you the Constitution is working. Okay? All right, a couple things to finish up. So starting in 1804, people realized, yeah, we could have prevented a lot of things like, you know, Jefferson versus Adams and Burr and all that. So in 1804, Congress and the states will ratify the 12th Amendment. That is the one that says you have to run as a team, the vice president and president. So they fixed that really early on in our nation's history. Okay, last topic has to deal with slavery. Want to point out in 1793, during Washington's first term, we have the Fugitive Slave Law. Remember, a fugitive is a runaway. Okay, this gives a southerner the right to go north, or to get a slave hunter to go north to retrieve their property, which means their slave in this case. Okay, you've heard that phrase jurisdiction. That means like power. So prior to this, there was some awkwardness where like someone would go and say, hey, this is this person's slave in Georgia, but it's like you're in like a place where slavery doesn't exist. You can't do that. This actually gives the South more power there. So it says, hey, this is a federal government law that says a southerner can go retrieve their property in the North. Okay. Also want to point out there is a rebellion in 1800 called Gabriel's Rebellion or Prosser's Rebellion. It's the same thing. Just note it never happened because the plans were leaked. Okay. But just because it didn't happen, y'all know what's going to happen because this rebellion could have happened. Stricter slave codes. Also, a lot of slaves who weren't involved in this, it's like guilty by association, were executed. Because people said, I bet you knew about that rebellion and you could have told us about the plans. So we're going to kill you. Okay. And then want to point out cotton. We haven't really talked about cotton yet, but cotton will start to be popular in the deep South, the lower South, think Georgia, South Carolina, eventually Alabama, okay? And a lot of people believe that slavery was going away, okay? Thomas Jefferson, for instance, he referred to slavery as a necessary evil. He says, look, it is a bad thing, but the South needs it. Like, it makes its money, but it's a bad thing, okay? And remember also in 1808, the Constitutional Convention decided that the slave trade would end. So he really did, a lot of people believe that that was going on its way out. What's going to mess it all up, though? The cotton gin. Eli Whitney got the patent for the cotton gin in 1793 during Washington's presidency. And we know that it separates the seeds from the cotton. And it does it 50 times faster than by hand. Okay, so basically the cotton gin, one cotton gin and one slave to operate the cotton gin does the same amount in the same time as 50 slaves like pulling away the cotton and the seeds from each other. That is really efficient. And you would think you wouldn't need as many slaves. No, those slave owners, they're greedy, okay? And they're thinking dollar signs. I'm like, if I buy more slaves, that means more cotton. And now I don't have to wait forever to separate the cotton from the seeds. I can just keep on going and making more money, okay? So what makes slavery like here to stay in the early 1800s and it's not going to go away? The cotton gin, okay? You will see that, like I said, people viewed slavery as a necessary evil around, late 1700s. It's a bad thing, but I get it kind of thing. That's what they're thinking. A couple decades later, no, it is not evil at all. It is a positive good. That's the phrase. In the 1820s and 30s, like, no, there is nothing wrong about slavery. Slavery is a positive good. The cotton gin is what changes that mindset. Okay. All right, so I'm going to show you a couple of clips, okay, that pertain to all these things, okay? Also want to point out that I did do a post about some bonus questions on tomorrow's quiz. Look at those flip grid things if you want to take advantage of that, but focus more on the actual, what would be on the quiz. The bonus questions are just 2 points each. Also, on this PowerPoint that you have access to, you go to the end of it, there's a couple of things that might help you as well that's related to the flip grid stuff. The first clip is going to be about the Xyz Affair, when this is that John Adams HBO series, when he finds out about the bride, when President John Adams finds out about the bride.
Through his agents, Monsieur Talleyrand indicated that for negotiations to proceed, a sum of money was first required for the pockets of the French. For the pockets of the French government and its ministers, that the price would be $250,000 for himself.
A sweet man, Monsieur Talleyrand calls that. And a loan of $10 million to demonstrate our good faith.
If Monsieur Talleyrand has been indiscreet, it would be wrong to ascribe blame to the entire French government.
Monsieur Talleyrand is the French government.
I cannot account for such effrontery. Unless our envoys had some part in this mistake.
Mr. Marshal vouches for the account, and I know him to be a man of his word. I am left no ground on which to expect our diplomatic mission to be accomplished on terms compatible with either the safety or the honor of this nation. So we must shield ourselves behind a wall of strength. Congress is prepared to grant my request to arm our merchant vessels and to fortify our harbors.
And? Well, that's not all, is it, Mr. President?
Should the need arise, we must be prepared to defend our borders with an army, yes. And to that end, I can think of no man better to lend the notion gravity than General Washington.
General Washington?
Well, he will exercise great caution in deploying it.
He will be a commander in name only, you must know that. You cannot expect him to take the field at his age.
I know nothing of the sort, Mr. Jefferson, no.
General Washington will defer to Mr. Hamilton as he always has. The result will be a provocation of the most immense order, both here and abroad.
And what precisely is Monsieur Talleyrand's unbridled contempt but a provocation?
War has been this administration's policy from the beginning. To pretend otherwise is disingenuous in the extreme.
If there is to be a war, Mr. Vice President, it will be France's doing and not mine.
Mr. President.
Okay, from that clip, you could see, and just some background information from the sergeant.
In Philadelphia.
Sorry. With the Xyz Affair, because it made the Democrat Republicans look so bad, because it made the French look so bad, people like Hamilton, this is earlier on, Hamilton's like, let's go to war. He's not even a politician anymore. He's like, let's go to war. Let's fight France. There's a lot of pressure to like fight France, but Adams like, no, I don't want to fight a war. I want to be neutral like Washington. Okay? Let's see. The next clip.
By these measures, some within your party hope to silence the opposition. Why blacken your fragile reputation by an assault on the freedoms for which we both fought? Do you intend to ship out the entire French population of the United States? Along with any other luckless soul who happens to voice a contrary opinion?
I'm entrusted with the nation's safety, Thomas. So these war measures will protect us from insurrection and subversion.
You cannot protect the nation by attacking the right of every man to speak freely without fear.
Formalized the principles of nullification in the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions of 1798. In response to the hated Alien and Sedition Acts, which were put into law by the John Adams administration, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison secretly authored resolutions for Kentucky and Virginia, declaring the federal acts to be a usurpation of powers never delegated to the federal government in the Constitution. While non-binding, they put in writing the foundational principles of nullification. That is, if the federal government has the exclusive right to judge the extent of its own powers, those powers will always grow, regardless of elections, lawsuits, protests, or other so-called checks and balances. In short, both Jefferson and Madison expected the states to take steps to bring down such federal acts without waiting for the federal courts to refer to them as unconstitutional. Jefferson began the Kentucky resolutions with a powerful statement about the role of the states. The several states composing the United States of America are not united on the principle of unlimited submission to their general government. Here, Jefferson was telling us that when the federal government violates our rights, we're not just supposed to sit idly by and wait for the federal government to stop itself. He continued, noting that whensoever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. In his original draft, Jefferson said that in response to such federal acts, a nullification of the act is the rightful remedy. This language was included in follow-up resolutions passed by Kentucky in 1799. Resolutions passed by Virginia just before Christmas in 1798 used very similar language. Authored by James Madison, they note that in response to federal acts outside the Constitution, the states are duty-bound to interpose in order to maintain within their respective limits the authorities, rights, and liberties appertaining to them. The Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, which came to be known as the Principles of '98, didn't explain how to actually carry out nullification, and they didn't invent the idea either. But the principles they espoused are timeless. Going to the federal government to fix problems created by the federal government doesn't work.
Although in 1800, running for president was a very different undertaking than it is today.
In the 18th century, if you wanted to lead, you had to pretend not to have ambition. And Jefferson, like everyone else, pretended that he did not have ambition.
So if you are someone who wants office, you cannot step forward and say, I want to be president. You would immediately be the person who would never be offered the presidency. This becomes really tricky if you're talking about an election. How do you run for office if you're not allowed to look interested in the office?
The answer? Newspapers. The early United States is even more literate than Great Britain. And by the end of the 18th century, more than 100 partisan newspapers have sprung up here. They push their friends' agendas and viciously attack their opponents.
Newspapers are capable of reaching across the nation. Newspapers would circulate. They'd be read in public places. People had access to them, so that the ideas in one newspaper would reach a much broader public than the smaller number of people who subscribe to newspapers.
Newspapers also allow the real Thomas Jefferson to stay hidden.
Jefferson is the most ambitious politically of the founding fathers. Jefferson goes to great lengths to conceal his political ambition behind this veil of scholarly rectitude. Yet Jefferson is a master of indirection. He's a master of the dinner party airing of gossip. He's a master of recruiting reporters to try and uncover salacious information about his rivals. Jefferson plays this game extremely well. One of his press agents was a fellow named James Callender.
And in one way or another, Jefferson is encouraging him and subsidizing him and smiling benignly on as Callender says horrible, evil, nasty things about John Adams and the Federalists generally. It's a very dirty campaign.
In January 1800, Callender publishes The Prospect Before Us, a 183-page anti-Adams hit piece, secretly financed in part by Jefferson. The pamphlet earns Callender a 9-month prison sentence under the Sedition Act.
At the time when Federalists still believed that the federal government could falter, that the federal government still had only a weak hold on the loyalties of the people, the kind of vicious attack that Callender and other Republican journalists unleashed towards the administration were dangerous. From our perspective, it looks terrible. From our perspective, there is no good reason to go after newspaper editors. But from their perspective, there was a lot at stake going after people like Callender.
But perhaps no figure is more important to the election of 1800 than the former New York Senator Aaron Burr, a man who Jefferson thinks can help him defeat John Adams.
New York was a pivotal state in the election of 1800. It had a lot of electoral votes, and the Republicans knew they needed to win it. Aaron Burr had proven that he could mobilize his networks to gain voters.
it is assumed that ideally speaking, he'll be vice president if everything works out, partly as a reward for all of the politicking he does in the course of that unfolding of the campaign of 1800.
Burr was every bit as smart as Jefferson, a highly educated man, politically exceedingly ambitious, and therefore Burr is someone who Jefferson never entirely trusts.
Burr does deliver on his promise of a Republican victory over the Federalists on Election Day. When the electoral votes are all tallied, Adams finishes a distant third behind both Jefferson and Burr.
But one thing went wrong. The Constitution did not yet distinguish between electoral votes for president and for vice president. And Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson received exactly the same number of votes.
And lo and behold,
All right, so again, there's a tie, and Hamilton's influence will result in Jefferson winning, okay? You do have a quiz tomorrow. Just want to point out, there is an optional quizzes. You can do unlimited times. That might help you, give you some direction on what to study for Chapter 7. There's also that Quizlet that's in the classwork tab. That there should be a Chapter 7 Quizlet, okay? Yeah, y'all may go ahead and log off unless you have questions. Don't forget to turn in your context. Turn in your context